So about the Webview language server, Webview architecture, plugin architecture, and how we can integrate that with our individual editor extensions, and what that process looks like, as well as just some general architecture. And we're going to start with kind of general architecture first, and how we communicate with plugins. So any plugin can be thought of as kind of like a consolidated set of functionality. So for instance, Duo Chat is kind of its own plugin. And then we might end up having a plugin that's specifically for not necessarily like the Duo Chat web view, but maybe this is like Duo Chat uh, um, almost like you would think of like a normal HTTP server. Like I'm gonna make a call to something and get something back. We might end up having a plugin like that. We don't have that today, but like so the plugins that we would have today would be like Duo Chat, Duo Workflow. I think Angelo has done some POCs that have included additional plugins. I don't know what he's calling them. So, um, but anyways, essentially it provides some functionality. It can provide, so it's optionally able to provide a web view, but it could also just provide endpoints for editors to call. And then eventually down the line, we could have it where plugins could actually rely on other plugins. So plugins could actually ask for, hey, I need this information. And then a plugin can say, I can provide that. Here you go. Um, all of that is handled through this message bus. So nothing directly like, in process says, oh, I'm going to call into something and get something back. Instead, it communicates with a message bus and says, oh, I'm making a notification or request of, hey, this thing happened, or I need this information. And then if it needs that information, it's a request, then it will wait for something to respond on that channel through this message bus. So the message bus integrates with the language server. A lot of this you don't really need to think about or know about until you get in the nitty gritty of stuff. And you definitely don't need to think about the message bus when integrating with the editor. So I've kind of abstracted that a little for this diagram. Um, um, but once you have that, then we kind of figure out, well, how does an editor talk to an individual plugin? And that is through JSON RPC, straight normal language server communication channels. And so we can send either two types of things, requests or notifications. Notifications are like fire and forget messages. We don't care if anyone's picked it up. We don't care if anyone's listened to it. We're just broadcasting. And anything can send notifications back and forth. So a language server can send notifications to the editor, and they will send it over the channel or the method name of $/GitLab/plugin/notification. And then requests will be sent over $GitLab plugin request. It uses the exact same JSON RPC notification and request protocol for handling this. So if anyone's done any language server integration work, you're familiar with requests and notifications. But at the end of the day, a request is essentially it's an asynchronous, I've sent something off and I'm waiting for a response to come back, and then I will continue my work. All requests currently have a one and done timeout. So if we don't hear anything back, and I think it's currently set to 20 seconds. If we don't hear anything back in a request, we just assume a timeout has occurred. Now, probably what we should do is have each editor eventually come back and say, and they can, I've got it set up currently with Visual Studio to do this, where it will look to see, can anything handle this request? And if it cannot, it immediately sends back, there's no registered handler. So that's, some exception gets thrown. And we would notify the language server, which would eventually notify the message bus, which would notify the plugin, and would throw a nice little exception there. But that doesn't necessarily have to occur. It's nicer than having to wait for a timeout. Cool. So each request and notification has a particular message type, or a message. Each message has its own sort of body that we would expect to see in the message. we would expect to see a plugin ID, which routes to the correct plugin, a type, which can be thought of as a method, and we might even end up renaming this to method to sort of keep the same nomenclature that the language server has for. So each one of these are kind of considered what method are we calling, and this is very much in the remote procedure call sort of nomenclature. What method am I calling on this thing? And so we would probably say something very similar. What method am I calling? And then what is the payload? Payload is optional. So um, um, I say payload is optional, but it is potentially not. It's one of those things where it's optional in some situations and not optional in others. And the way to think about this is that we will eventually, we don't have this right now for communication between the editor and the language server, but we eventually want to have a schema of all the different type of messages that each plugin that is exposed by the language server would would expose this large schema. And we can use that schema to do things like, well, if I send a message of this type, I know that it needs to include a payload of this type. And we can start to either do things like validate, either at runtime or, preferably at compile time, we can validate our message types. Or even going so far as to say, hey, let's generate wholesale clients for these plugins. And that's something that I'm going to be looking into on the Visual Studio side, or C# side, .NET side, is to be able to go, hey, I can use the Roslyn compiler to generate at compile time full clients for these plugins. Cool. The other things that you would need for Webview specific things. So that's kind of how you set up plugins. And we'll go into like an actual case study of looking at how we've done this in Visual Studio, which is live today. So all you Windows users, get on that. But we'll look at some code there, and I think that it can be somewhat directly applicable to some of the Java stuff, just because I would consider C# and Java to be kind of, sister languages. But there's also there's an MR open for how we can set this up for VS Code as well. So JavaScript stuff. And that's how you set up communication with a plugin. And the reason we're calling it a plugin instead of a web view is just because that web view component of the thing is optional. We don't have to expose a web view. But when a web view has been exposed, it would be available to be, you can make a call to, to an HTTP server that the language server exposes, to say, hey, get me the index.html for this web view, or give me the website, the web view itself. And we get that first by grabbing the web view metadata. And this actually responds back with an array of web view info. And each item within that web view info describes, hey, here's the web view ID, here is the web view's name, and here are the different URLs or URIs that you can use to access this web view. And so those URIs right now are only HTTP, or their protocol is HTTP. But eventually we're going to say, hey, this web view is exposed just from, it's a file, or there's a directory that you can mount to and get all of your web resources would live underneath this directory. And we need that for things like the web IDE. Web IDE has not been like prioritized as, hey, we need to get web views in there today. So there's been more focus on, let's get things working for desktop. So for desktop, the language server exposes an HTTP server. So we can, and it's on nice loopback port, so it's just localhost, and on a random port that the OS provides us. So the OS provisions, here's an open port that you guys can use, and that's one of the reasons why we need to actually say, hey, get me my WebView metadata, because we don't know what unless the language server were to send down some other message to the editor to say, hey, by the way, all web views are on this port, we wouldn't know until we call get WebView metadata, because get WebView metadata says, hey, here's all the places you can get it. If you, and this could even be the kind of case where we could expose WebView metadata for web views that aren't even exposed by the language server if we wanted to. Like a WebView metadata could, say, hey, by the way, this web view sits at, www.google.com. In which case we would go, great, let's expose google.com, inside of our web view. So it's not like a one-to-one correlation with a plugin. Cool. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does.
Yep.
Okay, cool. Awesome. All right. The other piece that was implemented fairly recently is theming. So technically, each editor would need to call in that, hey, my theme changed. And preferably, not only just when the theme changes, but kind of when you guys initially start up, you should say, here is my theme. And when you call did change theme, you would send along a nice mapping between, hey, this is a value that is part of our agreed upon. So right now everything's convention based. Our agreed upon theme schema. And so each key would belong in there, and the value being, this is essentially the CSS that I want to put into that theme key. And I'll show you an example of what that looks like in Visual Studio. But if you don't supply a theme, technically that's okay, because we default to a nice dark theme. But it may not look exactly like it's native to the editor anymore. But so if we want to say, hey, we want to use the same color scheme that's happening inside of our editor, then we would want to send along theme changes there. And I expect this to kind of change and grow as we, get, as we sort of understand what we're going to be doing with themes, as we start creating more web views that use themes, how do we want to do this? And potentially as the UI team starts using things more like design tokens, as opposed to, hey, each component gets its own sort of, CSS variables. Once that's in place, that's going to change the game from what we're going to do here, because we'd rather target these high level concepts rather than individual components. And we'll see that specifically when we start looking at the theme mappings. Cool. Any questions about any of this before I kind of just jump into some code? It's going to be C#, and I know that not everyone is familiar with C#, but hopefully I can walk through it in a way that we get the concepts rather than the syntax.
I have a couple of questions, John.
Dennis, go for it.
Thank you. So first of all, thanks a lot for this diagram. It makes sense. But I have questions about requests, notifications, get WebView metadata, and theme change. So technically the communication, the bridges between language server and the editor, right? So both requests and notifications are two-way messages, right? So both language server and editor can send either of these, and that will work, right?
Yes.
What's the scenario for get WebView metadata to be two-way communication? Like, what is the scenario where language server? Okay, got it.
It's the other, yeah. So
the other way around, right? Yeah. Okay.
It would be yes. You would only call get WebView metadata. The reason that you expect it to be a request. I expect to get some data back, but yes, only the editor would call the language server with get WebView metadata. Language server would never call editor with give me your WebView metadata.
Right. So, but the initiator of this, is it language server that initiates get WebView metadata, or it's editor like just pushes this out, and that's like whether you want it or not?
Yeah, so it's the language server. This is almost like it's a request, and I almost think of it like a RESTful API, where the editor is the one who's initiating. I want to get the WebView metadata from the language server, um, and the goal being that the editor is saying, I'm probably setting up web views, and I need
Mhm.
to know where do I get those web views from.
Right. Okay. And the same thing with the theme change, or technically, like as you mentioned, we don't want this to be sent out not only on change but also when they initialize the web view, right?
Yep.
So editor is sending this out, and then the theme information goes to language server to message bus. And now I have the question about the message bus. So on this diagram, all the plugins are connected to the message bus, and the message bus looks like some sort of a singleton. Is this correct?
It's not designed as a singleton, because you could technically say each plugin has its own message bus if you wanted to, but right now,
Right.
yes, they all travel through the same message bus.
So
Yeah.
this means that all of the plugins will, like, again, coming back to the theme change event. So the theme information goes to language server, goes to message bus, and all of the plugins get the theme update information at the same time. Is this correct?
Yes. So theme actually there's a special case that happens with theme changes. But yes, it's the same concept where it'll hit the message bus, and then um technically, instead of each, so I almost kind of go like there's a user land component of plugins, and then there's kind of like our sort of wrapper that each share, if that makes sense. Um
Right.
so each what happens with theming is that the wrapper essentially goes, I know that there's a web view here. I'm going to go ahead and send this down as a web view message so that people who are writing plugins don't have to think about this. So there's like and I'll call it like there's a user land side of things, and then this kind of like um, automated wrapper. Does that make sense?
Mhm. Right. Yes, it does. But then the last question. So the communication from a web view all the way to the editor. Let's take an example. Duo chat, sending out some information like user prompt, right? So
Yes.
web view sends, like, let's say it's the plugin A. So we send things to message bus, to language server, like technically it's all language server, right?
Mhm.
And then we send either a request or notification, depending on the event, request or notification, and then editor will do something with that, right? Like either propagate further and send it to the API in the monolith or something like this. Is this correct path?
So you're saying from the editor, we're creating
No,
a new
I'm saying from the
plugin.
web view. So
Okay.
you are in the chat web view, right? So you are in the web UI.
Let's say this
You
is Duo
send the message, right?
web view.
You
Uh,
send the message in Duo chat.
So what actually happens here is, because, and this is an important distinction, because inside of WebView doesn't communicate with the editor. WebView communicates to it even skips the language server. At least like in the sense that it's not communicating over JSON RPC. It could, but instead it communicates essentially directly to what we call a transport. Um, um, And for us, there's like a WebSocket implementation of this transport, which then says, great, time to communicate directly to the plugin. Um, so the actual UIs don't go through the editor, don't need to go through the message bus. It goes through its own path. And the reason for this is so that, well, there's a couple of nice to haves, but one of the things is that a web view can exist and function completely outside of the lifetime of an editor. You might need things that the editor does provide, like authentication and some of the initialization that happens between an editor and a language server. But you could technically run this WebView UI completely inside of a browser, and not need the editor integration at all. And one of the benefits of this are things like editors like um, um, uh, NeoVim. because NeoVim's not going to have a nice little browser widget. And instead, we're probably going to say, hey, here's your list of web views that you can open, and you click enter and you open it up in your default browser, and we wouldn't be going through the editor at that point. We'd be saying, okay, you're now just browsers communicating directly to your individual plugins.
Okay, that makes sense. Thank you.
Cool. Lena, I saw your hand was raised.
Yeah, I forgot about. Okay, I have a question about the plugin message type. I think you touched on that, but maybe not. Could you explain what this type?
So right now, when you send a message, it's going to be called type. I think a better name would be method. So it's very much in the sense that, and let me just show you. Let me open up VS Code real quick. GitLab LSP. So if you're in the LSP, I'm in Windows. It's got to hook up. It's got to connect to WSL Ubuntu version. Okay, great, perfect. Inside of packages, inside of the LSP, you'll see a couple of different. So you'll see a bunch of lib packages. These are libraries, and you'll see Webview packages, which probably want to rename to plugin, but right now they're Webview. And if we go to like Webview Duo Chat, and I were to go open up, source plugin index.ts, if you supply a setup function, which it gives you back essentially two message buses that you can work with. So like the web view, we can say, hey, on instance connected, then I get a message bus. Now from at this point, here's where it makes sense to go. I can go web view message bus, and I can go, let's say, on notification, and I can say, let's just say I'm listening for a notification of my new notification. Let's say I've got a nice little handler here for what happens when I get this back. So my new notification, that's the type or the method. So it's pretty much saying my web view, my plugin is now listening for this message type. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yes. Thank
Cool.
you.
It's very similar to kind of like the connection API on for the language server itself. And I think that the connection API, I'm pretty sure, don't quote me on this, but I'm pretty sure it has things like on notification, on request.
It does.
And they both take in like what is the method that you want to listen for, and so it's the same exact API, and that's really the idea here. So when you get this, let me go back to Excalidraw. When a message comes in through either request or notification, these two pieces of it, plugin ID and, well, right now it's called type. So I'll put it back just so that we don't build your integration based on this diagram. These pieces should be right, but I double check this, or at least I'll follow up and send everyone, hey, this is what we expect. I'm pretty sure this is correct right now. Plugin ID, type, and payload. And type is that piece. So really the plugin ID and type are essentially like an address for, hey, I'm looking for a handler at this address of plugin ID type.
So John, just, I'm not sure if I got this right, but like on a higher level, like the replacement with the web view that you integrated in LS would be just importing like a new package in the editor and like basically like overriding the message bus types of messages and like not overriding, but like replacing the what you do on those types of messages. We already have something similar, right, at the moment, but that will be replaced with exactly what you wrote there. But like for every type of message, you will have a certain behavior, and you would like do the communication with your own like editor and whatever is already happening there, right?
Yep, exactly. So like I can even show you if you're in this. Not everyone is going to be familiar with the code for the VS Code's Duo Chat implementation, but right now the way I did this was anything in this port folder is an exact copy of what's in VS Code. So like that is literally just copy paste. And you might be familiar with Chat Controller, which I didn't change a whole lot, but I did change it so it didn't live inside a port anymore. But what I had to change there was, hey, you get a nice little WebView message bus, and if you see it, what did I, what things did I do? I now have a notification for new prompt, and here's my callback for that. So it's and a lot of this stayed exactly the same from what we had in VS Code. So I didn't really change any of the high level structure of what messages are getting passed back and forth. It's just, well, now it's being passed over this message bus as opposed
Yeah, so
to.
it's basically like we are gonna like take out the old connector and put in a new connector, right?
Yep, exactly.
Cool.
Um,
Thanks.
yeah, and then so yeah, that's I mean, and that's where like the port for this really wasn't too bad. I mean, really, I had a few new things that I had to do. I had to sort of mock this kind of like chat platform manager in order to go, all right, I need to give it what I need for what I need. But we weren't really using, we didn't have to pull over all of platform, to get everything to work. But yeah, cool. So that's what we've got right now for Duo Chat as far as the plugin is concerned. And we can get into, so if anyone is starting to go, hey, I'm writing a new web view, or maybe even I'm going to extend a web view, let's have another session to talk about like what the API for setting up a web view looks like. Because I don't think it's super complicated, and I know that Angelo, I know that you went and like did it and asked me like 1 or 2 questions, but were able to figure it out mostly on your own. So I think that I like to think it's self-explanatory, but I know that it's not. So let's plan on having another session when we get to that point. Um, cool. I'm thinking about opening up some C#. How does everyone feel about that?
Let's go.
Okay.
One question before John, if that's
Yes.
correct.
Yes.
I'm curious, like what if a plugin fails receiving a message? Like and let's say you have multiple plugins registered, one fails. Is it built in to just ignore the error and continue with the other messages, or like does it cause everything to fail?
So it
curious.
should not cause everything to fail. Every one of these on the message bus essentially will just log, hey, we didn't get a let's say we were listening for a notification and then the callback failed. We've got to try catch around the whole thing and saying, let's just log that notification failed. It should not break, but that's not to say that we could do more if I start seeing things. But everything should just the idea and the architecture should be that nothing breaks anything. It just will log, hey, we can't continue. Something happened. Here's this. We need to look into it. And then ideally, every plugin, this is something that we need to think about as well, or at least we probably need an issue for and to work through, is that every plugin should be thought of as almost like we need a bulkhead around every plugin to where if a plugin fails, throws an exception, it should not leak into the LS, the language server at all. And it shouldn't like take down the message bus or anything like that. It should be very much like this is an encapsulated piece of functionality where maybe something takes down that the nothing else can run inside that plugin for some reason, but it shouldn't take down any other plugins, and it shouldn't take down the language server. Is the goal. The way I like to think about it, and the way I've proposed it a couple of times, is I almost think of plugins as being like little microservices. And I typically like that. I haven't seen anything that makes that feel wrong to me yet, but I think that'll be helpful, is to treat it like a little microservice where it's going to have its own API, and it communicates over a nice little message bus or an event stream, that kind of thing, and then other things will take stuff off of that message bus and go, oh, I'm listening for this. I can respond to it and do my own work. Maybe there's patterns that we will need, like pipeline of things that happen across plugins. We haven't gotten that far, and so I don't know if we'll ever need that. But if we did, we can, cross that as we need to. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Cool, awesome. All right, I'm gonna open up. Writer, nice little JetBrains IDE. I'm not gonna open up in Visual Studio because I can jump around a little faster in Writer.
Wow, I'm
we
shocked
can-
that we use Rider.
Oh yeah, I use Writer all the time when I'm writing C#, and then I jump into Visual Studio when I need to test. That says a lot about my. Oh wait, we're on stream. I love Visual Studio. Okay. All right, I'm in our GitLab extension for Visual Studio, and we're going to jump into a couple of different things. First is just the integration pieces for, and I don't really want to get into like we have to get into how is the whole Visual Studio extension set up. How do we do PhysX packages and stuff in Visual Studio? All of that's like beyond the point. No one cares about it unless you're actually writing, the Visual Studio extension. So the best way to think about it is, first off, we have a nice little language server client. We have a little, interface for language server. I could look at that ILS client. And at the very bottom here, we should see things for, like our, theme changed and our send plugin notification. I have not set up requests because we didn't need requests for Duo Chat. And so down the line, we might need it. But right now, we just have notifications set up. But so we've got our three little things that we just talked about, like get Webview metadata, send did theme change async, and send plugin notification. And then I'll jump into the actual client itself. We have this ls client ts TypeScript. This is totally anachronistic because we still have like our for everyone who didn't know, we had a Go language server for a little while, and we technically still have legacy code for the Golang language server client in here. But for the TS language server client, if I were to go let me jump back to here and find it real fast. If I were to go like get Webview metadata async, we can go see we call on our RPC, we invoke, we expect to get an array of Webview info back, and we call GitLab Webview metadata. And if we can look at what Webview info is really fast, this is what I was talking about before. We get an ID back, a title, and a list of URIs. They're strings. We could probably do something where they come in as URIs, or we deserialize them correctly as URIs. But right now they're strings. And that's it. So we have that. We have send plugin notifications. That's a Webview message. So really simple. It's a plugin ID, a type, and a payload. And if I were to jump back over here, we just notify GitLab plugin notification. Requests would be just as simple because we would end up going with it would be slightly more complicated because you'd expect to get some kind of value back out of it. But in I don't know if it's invoke. That's what they call it in the RPC client that we're using for but we would do an invoke async with whatever our expected payload would be, probably some generic up here, with GitLab plugin request. And then we'd send in our Webview message. And then we do like our send did theme change async. That's very, we notify with parameter object because we have some object that we're sending along as well. I think that I don't even think I think we probably could just use notify here. I'll have to look at that. That's implementation details. So yeah, so all you have to do is really essentially, hey, I have a way of communicating with the language server over these channels, and I'm sending very, very simple data models. Like my did change theme, is essentially, hey, I have for us as a dictionary, it's a nice little key value map of a thing called styles. So far, does that make sense? Okay, I'm seeing some nods. Yeah. Okay. So so once you have that, then you want to have something that goes, all right, I know how to send things. I want to now be able to receive things. Now in the C# side of things for our language server RPC connection, this is done by having this LS client RPC, which is a class that essentially we decorate it with, hey, this is if we get something back that's like text document published diagnostics, we call this. So this is our handlers for different things. I think and Laura, correct me if I'm wrong, I'm thinking that the Kotlin side does something very similar. Like we have a class that's for that it's sort of like it proxies the appropriate stuff. I can't remember. I'd have to look.
I'm
But
actually
go ahead.
I'm actually not sure, so I don't want
Okay.
to.
Okay, so I'm pretty sure that's the case. At least it was when I when I was doing like a POC work, I'm pretty sure I did something similar to this, where I had another class that it just proxied to handlers based upon some kind of like attribute or something. Maybe it was the name of the method. I can't quite remember. Anyways, in this case, what we're doing is setting up handlers for, hey, if I get a GitLab plugin notification, so if a notification is sent to me, I will handle that notification by, and this is where I start getting into the implementation details of what I did on the Visual Studio side, is I have this plugin message dispatcher, and I will dispatch this thing where I have a route where I created, say, hey, a route is a plugin ID, the message type, and it's the plugin ID, the message type, meaning it's a notification or request, and then the type, which should be the method. And then I send along, hey, this is the payload, which could very well be null or optional and we'll get into how I did the message dispatcher in a bit. But I expect that not everyone needs to implement it this way. But the goal here is that I have, when I get something, a GitLab plugin notification on the editor side, what we need to do is find a way to get to the right handler. So you're going to end up saying, I've created a handler somewhere. I want to be able to find the right handler and call it correctly. What my plugin message dispatcher does is that it will kick back out results, and those results will be in a J token. So for us, that's a a sort of a already parsed JSON structure that then we can go, great, I'm sending this over the wire anyways. Let me just or I'm sending it over as JSON. So if I already have it in JSON, fantastic. I don't need to like try to deserialize or convert it at this point. So and we can look at that in a second, but I essentially need two handlers here, one for plugin notifications and one for plugin requests.
Just quick question here. So I think
Mhm.
I know what you were referring now with the message handler, but on the Kotlin side, we only have one handler that is having like some sort of ifs, like if it's this type of message, if it's this type of message. In your case, what you implemented, do you need a handler for each type of message, or do you need just two handlers, one for each direction of the communication?
So for this, I have one for the JSON RPC. I kind of have one handler that then breaks off into what is this? We call it sub handler something that's going to handle this type. And you could do, I mean, for it's essentially a big giant if statement. You really could go, if notification params dot plugin ID equals duo chat. Whoops. Been writing some JavaScript. And then I could go if then I could go switch on like switch on the actual type. Let's just do another if statement. So if notification params dot type equals, let's say we were being notified on so it's funny because Duo Chat really doesn't send us back any notifications. It sends us back requests, because the only request it needs is going, what is the what is your current file context? It'll ask for things like, hey, I need to know where your cursor is. I need to know if you have any selections made, and then like text above that selection, text below that selection. So those all come from the editor because we didn't have cursor information inside of the language server. So we make a request. But let's say I had something called, particular, notification type. Let's just say my notification. Then we could say, oh yeah, my handler goes here. So that's essentially, I mean, as far as just like pure code flow, code execution is concerned, yeah, that's sort of what we're doing, is finding the right handler based upon, these things. Does that make sense? Is that what you were asking?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Yeah, so what I did was try to find something where I was like, I knew that this was going to eventually sort of grow, and we're probably going to have additional web views, and I wanted to find a way where people could write WebView specific handlers in a nice way. So I won't get into the nitty-gritty details yet. I'll explain first what I did enabled. So if I go to web views, so I have a top level folder, top level directory in the extension called web views, and then under that I have a thing called like Duo Chat, and I have a thing called Duo Chat plugin controller. And the way I wanted to think about this is that really we're either sending requests or we're sending notifications, but they're very much in this kind of like controller, I think is the right word, and so I have a single controller, and the way I do it is I've created a class where I can attribute it as being, hey, this is a plugin controller for the particular plugin ID of Duo Chat. I have a plugin request that says I'm a handler for the request get current file context. And then I am, it could take in optional parameters if it needs to, and then it will create the file context and return it. And then it'll be the responsibility of a higher level thing to turn that into a nice little J token that can be sent off, just a JSON object that I can send off. So I wanted to make this as simple as possible for people who are writing controllers, or like the actual handlers here. So now if we ended up having a new web view, someone could just go, oh, I'm just going to create another class. This is a controller for, Duo workflow. It asks the editor, it sends a notification to the editor. Great, I can respond to that. And on the flip side, if you have something that happens in the editor, so for instance, a context menu, I right click on something, and I go, all right, Duo Chat, which I don't, let's say, explain this code to me or something like that. In VS Code or Visual Studio world, we have these commands. And so we say, hey, there's a command of like, open Duo Chat command or toggle code suggestions command. I actually think I put some, I put them in here. Duo Chat commands, and we have something like let's fix selected code command. And what it ends up doing is it will call this method of send new prompt async with the / command to fix code. And if I jump into this and I actually go to its implementation, we get from our dependency injection, we'll get a plugin message publisher. So this is also an abstraction over the language server client, but it will call notify async of new prompt with this information. If I were to jump in to say, what is the iPlugin message publisher? Let's jump into that. Let's go into say who inherits this. Okay. It takes in an LS client and a plugin ID. And then you can just say, hey, I'm notifying, I'm calling notify on this, which for us, that's notification, send notification. The reason I'm calling it notify async in here is just because of the implementation detail of we're using a specific RPC library that liked using notify and invoke. So I'm just using their naming conventions. And then once we have things like requests, I'd probably say, all right, great. This message publisher can also invoke. and we'd expect to get something. It's going to have a task of a particular, generic, what we expect for our return value. Cool. I'm jumping way into things that I don't know if anyone really needs the information on that, but there are kind of like two sides to the equation. One being I might need to send things to the language server, in which case I kind of need to get something that either directly invokes the language server client or as an abstraction over it. And I went for abstraction because, I don't know, C# just feels like an abstraction language. Yeah, so let me jump back to if anyone is interested in, what I ended up doing on the control, like building out these controller side of things, not Webview controller here. Let me go to Webview, do a chat. The plugin controller. I can dive into that. I think it could be helpful, maybe on the Java side as well, but I also don't want to. I guess I don't want to add in extra details that people don't need for a high level overview. What are people's thoughts? How are people feeling right now?
I feel the more the better, but it depends on the time we'll have. So
Yeah, I know that we only have about 5 minutes. Is there any questions? I guess we'll start with that. Is there any questions? And I can stay after to answer anything else or go over things in detail more. So I'll be here as long as people want me here.
Can you tell where like this point where the extension tells like, so here I load the web view from language server and then so will I just
Yes.
like communication, like when is the point when it loads?
Yes. Yes.
Mhm.
You're a very good question. So I've focused a lot on like communication with the plugin side, but you're totally right. I have missed on where do we actually load up the web view. And so one thing that happens in every editor is you're going to end up going, I've got some sort of window or panel or something that I'm going to put the my web view into. And that's no different for Visual Studio. And so they call them tool windows. So every one of these things, this is a tool window. And so we create a tool window where we will have this content of a duo chat tool window control. And that is if you're familiar with WPF or C# development stuff with Microsoft UI things, then we have to build this control out, which for us is we have to do certain things to like sort of set up the fact that we're going to use a web view and use this particular this particular control, which essentially uses Microsoft Edge as its browser engine. And but at the end of the day, the important piece is for us actually is here. What we do is let me find where we do this. Bogdan's not on this call, is he? I don't think so. So we have a WebView controller initializer. No, that's for theming. Okay, WebView controller, where what we do is when we initialize this, we go grab our LS client. What is our current LS client for our workspace? We grab the WebView metadata. We find, and for right now, we are just grabbing the first one where it equals a WebView ID. We should be probably like single or default. We should never run into a situation where there's multiple entries. Then we will say, hey, we know these URIs. We will grab the first URI. Probably still not the best idea. We need to find the first URI that is HTTP. Right now, everything is HTTP, but eventually we'll have other protocols that we support as well. So at this point, what we've done is this controller sits alongside with this control. Where do we get this control from? Oh yeah, I'm pretty sure Visual Studio gives it to us. Yeah. Okay, yeah. So we create a Webview controller, and we can register. So that's why we have to do Duo Chat controller, which is a Webview controller, and what we do right now is the Duo Chat controller is registered with our dependency injection container, and then our DI container we can call initialize on it and say, hey, anytime we need to, if we need to, we will call this. Let me go back to Webview controller, and we call this create and show async. What it'll end up doing is going, great, let's actually do the work of saying, hey, Visual Studio, we need to show this tool window, and we can inject, hey, here's the content that you're going to be getting. And our content comes from, let's initialize the controller with the control with this URI, which is a, HTTP localhost, whatever the port is, /webview / the actual ID of the webview, like duo-chat. And then you would get to your chat window. And yes, there's a lot of very specific kind of Visual Studio quirks happening here. And so I don't expect that that's going to directly translate to anything, any other editor. But at the end of the day, from a very high level, you're taking you're taking a tool window, and you need to put inside of whatever your tool window, your panel or something, you need to say, I'm going to put a web view. And a web view either needs to support, hey, I can do URIs directly or not. And if it doesn't, then you probably have to nest it inside of an iframe that can, support like an external URI, something that's going to be, I'm going to actually have to make an HTTP request for. And the reason I say that is that Visual VS Code doesn't support that. Like, we actually have to nest a sub iframe and say, hey, yeah, we have this top level thing that just holds an iframe. That iframe then points to our HTTP endpoint. And
I have a quick question. So this URI that is gonna like come back through the request, is this gonna be the same wherever you use the cross plugins? Like, will it be exactly the same?
yes, so the URI will change
And
every
a
time.
follow-up question on that, if it's the same one, I feel like the themes are so dependent on the like on the editor, right? Like on the IDE, as in like how would themes be handled on the WebView side if themes are so kind of like coupled with the IDE?
Yep, let's talk about themes real fast. So if I jump into themes real quick and I go to theme provider. So this is our current mapping for themes for Visual Studio. And what we've done is created, and I'll also open up inside of the GitLab LSP, we have a lib WebView theme. Inside of this, we have our theme type. And this is probably going to look weirder than the other one would. But anyways, I define a theme inside of the language server side of things and say, hey, I'm going to expect that we're going to have a theme that looks like, let me just look at this real quick. Theme keys. We're going to have a thing called editor foreground, a thing called editor foreground muted, and editor foreground disabled, editor background, editor border, editor font family, and a whole bunch of other ones. And not everything needs to be supplied. Like, and a reason for that is that we will have, like, hopefully we will have reasonable defaults. And so, for instance, this is like the default dark theme. And right now we're only really supporting, hey, we've got some global styles. We've got, hey, what do buttons look like? What do inputs look like? And what do links look like? That's really all we needed for 90% of Duo Chat. And there's probably a few things that we can still work on with theming there. But what ends up happening so to answer your question very quickly, we end up mapping those. But then you would kind of go, well, Duo Chat's probably not going to go like, I'm using editor button background. And that's not what it's doing today. What it was doing back in like VS Code was, well, we're mapping the VS Code. So VS Code would send along these CSS variables. And let's go look at the what we do right now.
Then you have to define them for each editor in particular.
So what should happen is that every editor tries to map to every editor should try to map to something like this. You know, what do we want to call the editor's background? What do we want to call the editor border? What do we want to, and try to be as as universal as possible, and we are going to run into a situation where we're going to go, once you try to normalize across a whole bunch of different things, you're going to end up with like a lowest common denominator problem where, let's say if we said, hey, there's buttons and this is what's in a button, and let's say, 3 of our editors support buttons, but Duo, not DuoChat, but NeoVim doesn't have a button concept, or doesn't theming doesn't go to buttons. We're just going to have to sort of go, well, we'll use our reasonable defaults. Does that make sense?
My question was more like what you have in this folder, in the themes folder, is something that each ID will have to implement themselves to
Yes.
override labels, depending
Yes.
on the ID specific labeling and how they are called in your ID.
Yes, and so what we've done here is try to say, so like an IDE in Visual Studio world, we would say, hey, we have this environment color set window text color key. Okay, we then have to go, great, let's take the current value at that key and place it into here. That's our goal. So we're mapping to a common schema, and then sending that common schema to the Webview so that there can be a general expectation that when someone is, defining, because like here we define our own DuoChat CSS variables. What they're doing is just taking from, well, what is editor foreground or editor foreground muted, which is our own thing. So in Visual Studio or in VS Code, it used to all be, VS Code foreground, something like that. And so a lot of this sort of came from, hey, VS Code is we still even have some VS Code things in here where we just went like, you know what? We probably need to do this at some point, but we didn't finish the mapping here, and we don't really know if we got like I said, we were 90% there on styles, so we'll come back and do this, and we wanted to get some feedback on whether or not this was the right approach. Theming in general, I think can, like I said, I think that there will be a huge sea change once people move to like design tokens, which aren't component based. Like we're not talking about alerts and buttons and inputs, and we're just kind of talking about these high level features, which still might not be something that works within like the editor realm, because every editor kind of defines everything on a component basis, and that was the thing that I was like, I still don't really quite know what I feel like this works, but I don't know if it's the best yet. But the goal in my mind is to make it so that a Webview doesn't have to know I'm in VS Code, or I'm in JetBrains, or I'm in Visual Studio. It can just go, I know that I live in, this language server realm, and the language server has defined a common schema for me to work with styles. Lynn, I see your hands raised. I don't want to.
I wanted to clarify if I understand it correctly. So that theming is kind of a separate package or plugin on the language server side, and it communicates with the client. Client sets the theme, and then other plugin like DuoChat can import the theme. Like, so it's kind of plugins will communicate between them. It's not like they will communicate but between themselves, but it's just like a
So
import like something from the other plugin.
Yeah, so it is something that each plugin can, so I'll show you this. So let's go to DuoChat, and I'll go to, like, this is the actual front end application stuff. Like we have a nice view component here. Here's app.view. If I were to go to, and I think it's message bus. Yeah, okay. So when I call this, there's nice little function we have inside of this package GitLab org Webview client. Essentially, this is a way to say, let's just start up all the things that are going to need to happen for a message bus to work here. And so like I've got and what's cool about this is that on the front end side, this is all typed. So like I know these are the notifications that this can send down to me. Clean chat, new record, set loading state, and update record. You know, I can so I can send those things. One of the things that will be provided inside of this GitLab org WebView client. So if you is let me see if I can just jump in here from here. I can. Wonderful. It sets up the theme change listener. So if a theme has been changed, then we add that to the document element and set a whole bunch of CSS variables. So the idea here is that every web view will get you know, the set of CSS variables that we've declared over, over let's go look at this one because I think it looks nicer. You know, you should expect to get every one of these in some fashion. And it's the same sort of expectation that people who are writing in the VS Code the VS Code WebView side of things would expect to get as well. And I think that that's a reasonable expectation that you should go, we have a set of CSS variables. You should expect to be able to use those. And then you can safely ignore them as well. So if you were like, I don't want to follow the theme on things, then it's like, great, just don't use, editor button background, or just override it, but be careful because expect that if a theme changes in the editor, we'll probably overwrite your overrides. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. Perfect.
Okay, cool. And then the other thing I was going to show was that if you're wanting to dig into the core functionality for the WebView, you can actually go into lib WebView. It's probably called lib plugin. We're sort of changing the naming convention as we went on, but this is one of the very first packages that I had created. And if we actually look at the setup for WebViews, so if I actually go to setup, I don't think it's in plugin. Maybe it is. Yeah, we'll go WebView setup plugins. Maybe it's not. I have to look where maybe some of this changed. Because I actually thought it was here. What we end up doing is like listening for theme changes. Yeah, theme provider. Who's the theme provider? Setup WebView plugins. That's what I thought. Who uses the theme provider? Oh, okay. Okay, we set up the WebView theme listener. Wonderful. Okay. And what this does is goes, hey, anytime the theme has changed, we broadcast to every web view that, hey, the theme change, this theme change notification method, which is called __GL_ on theme updated. And we send along the theme info. And anytime a web view is connected, we also send a notification of, hey, this is the latest theme. So that way, we're trying to say, hey, all web views are in sync. One thing that we also are, I think I had an MR up for it, but I don't think it got merged in, was for when a web view you call the HTTP endpoint to say, hey, give me, the index.html for this web view, or the root of the web view. We also inject the theme right there so that you don't have this. The goal is to try to get rid of any kind of minor flicker of theme change, and so that it has everything it needs right away. Cool. Yeah, there's and we've gone over quite a few different things. Any questions on themes, and then maybe anything we've talked about in general?
If you would have time to tell about like how the editor or the client will share the context, like for example, selected how you implemented that, like I select the text in the editor, say to the chat, explain this code, or like write me a test for this code. Like I just want like the steps for the communication, right? So there is
Yeah.
the chat will ask the editor, or it will ask the language server, and like what's this?
Yeah, let me go ahead and I'll start on the language server side of things, because because we can kind of see where that actually, like where that happens, and we can try to trace it through. So let's go WebView, Duo Chat. Let's go to plugin. Let's go to Chat Controller, because what's going to end up happening is let me find where I go send request. Yeah, okay. So when we have this little method called get current file context, where we will send the request of get current file context and then expect to get either a GitLab chat file context or undefined. And if we catch an error, then we log as a warning and return undefined. And this is the current behavior, I think, in Visual Studio or the VS Code extension when we grab context, but we can actually see where this happens. So like if I do a prompt, you know, like which I think this is public. So let me find the one that is almost like identical to what we're doing in yeah, we set up our message handler. And we say, hey, when we get a new prompt, so this is coming from the message, this is from the WebView. The WebView user has typed in some prompt, they've pressed enter. We receive a notification, new prompt with this message. We build a record, and that's a GitLab chat record, and then we grab the file context. Now, we know that when we get that file context, we have to talk to the editor. So we actually send that notification to the editor. Let me jump back into C# land, and I'll close all the tabs here, and let's go back down to my Duo Chat controller, Duo Chat plugin controller, where what we say is, oh, you sent me a message from Duo Chat at the get current file context method, and this is my handler. So my handler says, well, I'm going to call this GitLab chat file context .create from current context async. This nice little thing here probably should have been somewhere else. It's fine. It's fine. It's a little static function that returns a task of this thing. So Visual Studio specific stuff, I have to jump to the right thread, and then I have to get the right, what's the active document. I get the active, if the active document has a selection or not. I can know its file name, its selected text. Then I can start getting its caret, like what's the current cursor position, you know, what's the start point of things. I can get the content above the cursor. I can know where my endpoint is, and I get the content below the cursor. Then I create this GitLab chat file context. But if there is a selection, then I have to do slightly different things. But at the end of the day, I get a GitLab chat file context that comes back up through here. It gets because this gets called kind of dynamically. It will eventually work itself back up to where we were before. So I can get into that dynamic invocation, but that's very like C# based, and I don't know if anyone needs that right now. I think the only one I think might use it is anyone working on the JetBrains side of things, and maybe on, I don't know if that's something that you'd be interested in, but anyways, for the Duo Chat plugin controller, this eventually comes back out to language server.
Can I clarify at this point? So like at the point when Duo Chat makes a request, right? So it is sent as a LSP like request to the clients, and clients send back a response, and language server like tells the WebView. So here's like the response from the
it ends up just back
Mhm.
in chat controller, wherever we were right here. Yes, it just ends up back here, because this is just what we end up doing is we have the at this point we're going to communicate over our JSON RPC connection, but we just wrap the whole thing in a promise, and so it isn't returned until we got something back from the server or we timed out. And so yeah, it's that's exactly what's going on.
Okay, thank you so much.
Yeah. All right. I'm pretty sure I have not been keeping up with chat. I think everyone else dropped. Which is
Can I ask
totally
a question real quick?
Yeah.
So like on a high level, is this the goal, right, would be to substitute this implementation in for like the view file that's in JetBrains. So both the like Duo chat window and then also like quick chat, but that would probably be like a different implementation.
Yeah, I think quick chat. Let's talk about quick chat separately. I'm currently
Okay.
dealing with quick chat stuff, and I really
Okay.
want to use Webviews, but I'm kind of getting some pushback from it. So we'll see.
Oh, gotcha. Okay.
Uh,
But at least for Duo chat, we do want to replace the current implementation with the language server
yes.
implementation. Yes.
Yes.
Do you happen to know anything about sort of the game plan for that, or like, are you the wrong person to ask about that?
So I'm probably the wrong person, especially to ask about like priorities or timelines or anything like that.
Okay.
My thought is that anywhere we possibly can, it's probably helpful to put to use web views here, so that we kind of get a build once kind of thing. You build it, we can build stuff in the language server, and then we get it in whatever editor we've integrated web views with. So without directly, setting up Duo Chat, we would get Duo Chat in, hopefully, Visual Studio, JetBrains, VS Code, I know that Aaron's working on Eclipse, and he got Duo Chat working really quickly, and didn't have to think about, because like with JetBrains, we have all this complex logic around, we all had to figure out how do we get GraphQL stuff working here, and we already have it working in the language server. It's like, could we just use the language server for all this? And that's kind of the goal, is to say, if we've already figured it out in the language server, let's let the language server be the sort of like we're all that's our core competency, and then we sort of have, we very strategic about where we, can work on specific editors with. Does that make sense?
Yeah, for sure.
But yes, as far as like general, hey, what's the timeline on some of this? And I don't know if maybe you weren't asking specifically about timeline, but I can't really tell you.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, and I think it's good. I'm really glad to be kind of talking about this with everybody, because part of me wasn't, not unsure that this would work, but more like unsure if this is the developer experience we want, because I want to make sure that we're, that people feel very comfortable writing, and I'm trying to also comfortable writing stuff, but also not feeling like, it's all this magic back here, and I just don't even think about what's going on back there. So I think having more people on it and finding like, hey, here's a little quirk, or I don't like this, or this feels funny, those kind of feedback are going to be super helpful as people go on, just because I think this is an ever evolving sort of thing.
Totally.
Yeah. Cool. Yeah, I'm happy to stick around, but I also, if anyone has any questions or wants to dive into something specific, but I also know that we're 20 minutes over time. So
Yeah, thank you so much, John. I would love to reach back to you when I'm just like going to start like Duo Chat integration in VS Code.
yeah.
So do you think it will be like it will come down to loading the chat in the
Yes.
VS Code and setting up the communication? So it basically comes down to these like 2 steps to make
Yep.
it work. Or is there anything else I'm missing?
That's the big piece. Is and we technically do have you seen this working in VS Code yet?
I mean the chat, but not the Webview chat.
The Webview chat.
Yeah.
If you got a second, I can show you. Because I actually let me CD. Let's see what we got here. Oh yeah, CD GitLab VS Code extension. All right, let me make sure that I'm I'm on main. Great. Should get full. Oh. All right. I'm going to go ahead and do an npm install because I'm not sure how. What I was going to show you it working, because we actually do have it behind a feature flag right now. But the way it's set up right now is if you go into common Webview and then go into we have a setup. No, we have the setup web views function. And what we end up doing is inside of setup web views, we call get webview infos, which is the which ends up calling the language server and says, give me back that whole array of all the web views. We then filter it by this fixed webview info so that we have, DuoChat's the only one that we're putting under, that's under this right now. And then we call this setup WebView function, adding it to disposable, registering that disposable with VS Code. But in our setup WebView, which is where the fun stuff happens, we declare a view, gl.webview. And this would be like DuoChat. We create a new LS WebView controller, which is the view ID, a URL, and a title. And then we push all the things to the right disposables that we need to. We register the WebView view provider. We register the command of viewid.show, where if you call that, then it will show the controller, stuff like that. If I go to LS WebView controller, all this thing does, let me please open. Thank you. And inside of LS WebView controller, all it does, it's not specific to DuoChat. It's not specific to any specific web view. It just says, hey, you're giving me a URL. Wonderful. I'm going to go ahead and set that as the web view's HTML. I'm going to get web view content, which for us looks like, I can actually go to our template, and it's got a it's a really simple HTML that has one thing in it, an iframe with a URL. Says, what am I pointing to? And if I go to the LS WebView controller and I go, we get that content, and we switch out the HTML with like, what's our origin, what's our title, and what's our URL. And then I also do some stuff to go, hey, if it's OSX, we have this other script we need to be able to promote keyboard events up the chain. So it's really, really simple. The one thing we don't have hooked up right now is let's have the language server request for what's the current cursor information with file info. So I can show you it working. Let me go. I can do npm run watch -- editor equals VS Code. Okay, what happened here? Is it not watch? Oh, I'm in VS Code extension. No wonder. I confused myself with my the way I navigated. Let me go npm run watch editor equals VS Code. I probably don't even need this because I think it's into the language server version that it has, but I'll do this anyways real quick. Okay, I think we're good. Hopefully we're good. And then I will run everything. Sorry guys. Hey, I actually am gonna have to jump real quick. But what I was gonna show you was so this DuoChat that's right here is actually DuoChat from the language server, and the way you set that up is inside of settings.json. If you do gitlab.featureflags.language server web views and set that to be true, then it will use the language server's web views. But sorry, I am going to have to hop. I've got electricians here, so I'll...
Okay. Thank you so much, John. I'll get back
Yeah.
to see
Thanks.
what we are. Yeah. So it
Yeah,
looks like
definitely.
most of the job. Thank you so much. Great.
Yeah, thank you. Bye, guys.
Yeah.